Hello everyone. I have had a long history of seeing ghosts and experiencing events that I can only categorize as paranormal. This post has the potential to be quite long, so I apologize in advance. I will share my most vivid and interesting events. I'll start with the events that began to occur when I was dating my first real girlfriend back when I was in my early 20s. About 7-ish years ago. My girlfriend had always told me she was haunted, and at the time, I was much more of a skeptic than I am now. Our apartment was on the top floor of a small building. There were only 3 stories, and 4 apartments per floor. Weird stuff had tended to happen around the apartment from time to time. Most notably, a picture that we hung on the wall always seems to fall off its hook with some level of regularity. I talked it up to it's just not sitting on the hook very well, but sometimes we would come home and find it quiet. We would find it quite far across the room sitting on the floor, which that I could not explain. We also had 3 cats at the time, and they all seemed to at different times stare at the same corner of the room, at the ceiling. They would sit there for long periods of time, just staring into the empty corner. These things were weird up until this point, but things got far creepier. One night, my brother and his then fiancée, now wife, came over for a visit. My sister-in-law claimed to be very strong spiritually, and her and my girlfriend decided it would be a good idea to play a Ouija board. But I'm not sure I don't have to tell you, or some of you, is a bad idea for the inexperienced. My sister-in-law and girlfriend were able to make contact with something that answered questions that I asked that neither of them could possibly know. I wanted to test to see if they were messing with me and my brother. I asked what my recently passed grandfather had told me before he died. Correct answer. Asked about a patient who had died that none of them even knew about. Correct answer. At the time, I was understandably creeped out. The board even accurately predicted some future events that have come and passed. It told us that my patients followed me around for some time after they passed before they moved on. I also said that the corner that the cats were always staring at was a place in our apartment where the spirits of my grandfather and girlfriend's mother were. Unfortunately, it was the stuff that happened in the months and years after we had played that was truly unnerving. From the night on, things escalated. The first thing was that the picture was on the wall. It began falling much greater regularity and traveled much further. One day while sitting in the living room, the picture flew off the wall and landed completely across the room. We were so startled that we stopped putting the picture back on the wall and left it leaning on our fireplace from then on. Being that we lived in an apartment, the hallway light outside of our apartment was always on, and looking at the front door at night, you could see the light from the hallway shining under the door. One night, we were noticing that you could see 2 breaks in the light, like someone was standing right outside our door. We investigated many times, trying to figure out what was going on. We moved everything away from the door thinking it was just our doormat. It was still there. We opened the door several times, thinking maybe someone was actually out there, but the hallway's always empty and quiet. We even tried sneaking up to the door very quietly and peeking through the peephole and thinking maybe someone was pranking us. We never saw anyone or anything. The worst part was that the shadows came and went. They weren't always there, but became so regular that at night, if I had to go to the bathroom, I would make a point of not looking towards the door because I didn't want to see if whatever it was there. The fire alarm system in the building at that time started to go wonky as well. We had lived there for a year, but we used the Ouija board and never had issues, but after that night, the alarm of the whole building would randomly start to go off in the middle of the night and wouldn't shut off until the fire department showed up and shut it off. They came to the door after the third or fourth time it happened and asked if we were all right. We said yes, and we asked what was going on. He said he had no idea, but the system kept on getting activated for no reason. Cupboard doors in our kitchen would open on their own, and our Google Home would start talking to no one, saying things like, "I can't do that," when no one had spoken or even made a noise. One time it even made a really loud and strange squeaking noise. After that, we unplugged it, and I never plugged it back in. While I was working out of town, for a while my girlfriend was finishing her last year of university. We would text all day and video chat at night. She told me on 2 occasions that something had woken her up that she couldn't explain. Once she said she was woken up to the sound of someone clapping once right behind her head. She said that she was so scared she froze and didn't move and didn't roll over to look out of fear. The second time, she said she was woken up out of a deep sleep by the sound of a woman screaming in her ear. She was terrified, and I felt so helpless because I was at least a 9-hour drive away. Advance to a couple years later, we broke up, and I am now living alone in a townhouse. By the way, not the first time I have lived alone. In the town close to the main city, the previous tenant went through some hard times because, unable to pay their rent, ended up basically fleeing the house in the middle of the night. They must have left some bad energy behind. From the first night after I moved in, I found that there was a weird energy to some of the rooms, and the main floor made you feel unwelcome and uncomfortable at night. It made you feel anxious, fear when you're down there alone. It got to the point where I wouldn't go down there at night. I would go up to my room and stay there all night. I thought for a long time that it was just me being scared, and just because I was by myself in the house. That was until I started dating my next girlfriend, who would say that she felt the same way when she was down there at night, even when I was home. She is a quite spiritual person and actively does spiritual practices. She felt the house had a frightened energy about it, like imagining the energy of a scared child, which was exactly how I would describe it. The last major thing happened was about 2 or 3 months before we moved out. We were sitting downstairs on the main floor watching TV. My girlfriend was sitting on the other couch and had her hand hanging down when she said that something cold passed her hand. She sat up and she put her hand out and said it was like a cloud of cold air and it was moving. I put my hand out and I felt it. It was like you were running through a cold fog. We followed for about a minute before it disappeared. We never experienced anything like that again. Since moving, nothing strange or unexplained has happened. Knock on wood. Literally, as I'm writing this, I'm hearing footsteps on my front porch. It's 4 a.m. and no one should be out there. But you got me bent if you think I'm going to check to see who or what it is. They are just pacing back and forth from where the steps are to get up onto the porch and outside of my window, and even banging on the wall right beside my bed. My family and I have been experiencing paranormal things heavenly for I think 4 days now, and we did experience things before, but it stopped around 3 months ago, and now it just started back up. There's a lot to it. Here's my story. So for the past few months, my boyfriend and I have started living alone together in a house we previously lived in, but with his grandmother. She moved out when we had our son, so now just us and our 3-month-old. It started before she left. We are surrounded by woods on every side. the backside being the thickest and the two on the other side of the houses being thin, and you can actually see through them in the fall and winter. Neighbors on all sides, most being family, but to the back it's a long gravel driveway that leads to I think 3 different houses, so still probably a half a mile into the woods in that direction. Anyways, we heard a whistling sound in the woods, not like what you're thinking, but an actual human whistle, and it didn't really seem to be scary at first. We assumed it was some crackhead or someone walking or something, but then it started bouncing from being heard on the left side of the house in the woods to directly in front of the house in that patch of woods, then back and forth and occasionally to the right of the houses, moving in humanly fast, never stopping. We heard that only at night and every night for at least 2 weeks, then on random nights scattered here and there. Boyfriend was actually convinced that it was someone messing around on our property, so one night when the whistle was closer to the house than normal, he loaded a gun, got a flashlight, and went to investigate, while I stayed on the porch of the bigger of the 2 houses on the land, closer to where the whistle was at that moment. He walked to the tree line and said something to the effect of, "Whoever's out there needs to leave or I'll shoot," just in case it was some of his family that lives around us messing around in the woods. He said he heard some rustling in the leaves on the ground, too close for his comfort, so he shot at the ground in front of him to try to scare it or them off, and immediately after that the whistle stopped. We heard it on a different nights down the line, but never that close after that. We started to notice that it was silent outside, and we talked about the whistle. It would appear. I started joking that it was a skinwalker trying to scare him. No clue what it actually was. Not sure how long after. Boyfriend and I were in a bigger house on the land in the kitchen, about to walk to the front door and leave to come back to our house. There's a hallway connected to the kitchen as we were walking out to the right, and straight ahead is a living room and the front door. I'm walking behind him, and as we're walking out, I pass the hallway to the right. I am facing the door, my back to the kitchen now. My face right eye was sort of covered by my hair, so my view was obstructed, but I saw someone beside me in the hallway, and it was normal for my boyfriend's mom, who lives in that house, to wake up randomly and take her dogs out during the night, especially when we were over there making noise, so I figured it was his mom, although all I saw out of the corner of my eye was a dark figure about my height. It was too late for me to move out of the way since I was already halfway past the hallway mid-step, so I didn't have time to avoid bumping into her. I felt myself bump into her and brush against her shirt. After I passed, I turned to apologize to her, but when I turned around, there was no one there. The house was mostly dark, and everyone was asleep, so naturally I grabbed the back of my boyfriend's shirt, and I pushed him and said, "Go now," and we ran back to our house. When I told him, he said he didn't see anything there when he passed that spot. Then I had our son and his grandmother moved out. Maybe the 2nd or 3rd morning, being alone in the house, we wake up and he tells me how he woke up in the middle of the night to some almost dramatic laughing. He didn't say where the sound was coming from, but he said it was a man's voice. I can ask more about what he heard if needed. I didn't really believe him, out of my own fear, that I tell him it must have been scary, and I tried to comfort him. 2 nights later, he was off work and was going to get up with the baby that night, so we had switched spots in bed, so I could sleep on the side I liked that's up against the wall. I don't know what time it was, but I woke up in the middle of the night, that night, to the sound of a man laughing hysterically. Sounded exactly like at the end of the Thriller music video when Vincent Price laughs creepily, but in a different voice and went on for much longer. So being half asleep, I turn over to tell my boyfriend to be quiet or he'll take the baby. But my boyfriend is dead asleep. My baby is dead asleep. I can still hear the laughing. So this jars me almost fully awake, and I sit up, and I realize the laughing sounds like it's coming from right outside the wall, beside our bed, which means whatever it was had to be outside, either right at the wall or at the window above our bed. But you got me bent if you think I'm checking to see who's laughing at probably 3 or 4 a.m. So I just went back to sleep. Whistling and laughing have stopped since winter came, but have been replaced by creaking in the loft in our house that we stayed in while his grandma still lived there, as if someone is moving around up there. I can see into the loft from the bed and couch. It's a tiny house, and I've never seen anything up there. But 3 days ago, I heard creaking again and looked up there from the couch, but of course, found nothing. Looked around the house because I was alone and freaked out. Still nothing. Go to the door and flip on the porch light and look out the curtain. Again, nothing. But just as I am about to turn around to sit back down on the couch, something touches my arm. So I spin around, scared out of my mind as to what or who I'll see when I do. And nothing. Later that night, I have to pick up my boyfriend from work, so I'm driving along on a bumpy back road at 9 p.m. because I refuse to take the interstate, and I come up on this sharp curve in the road. The road is fairly new to me, so it surprises me, and I hit my brakes and look in the rear view mirror to see if there's any cars behind me about to rear end me for just randomly slamming on my brakes. And I see a whole figure of a man in my backseat against the glow of my tail lights. I look at the road because I need to turn or I'm gonna wreck. And when I look back, he's gone. I rushed to my boyfriend's job, got out of the car and waited for him because fuck that. Next night, I'm home alone again while my boyfriend's at work. I start to hear creaking in the loft. I'm scared, so I start recording to see if there's anything and hopefully show myself there's nothing to be scared of. I record the whole house back and forth a few times. And in the video, there's nothing in the loft the first time, but when I come back, there's what I see to be a face. A white aura looking thing at least. I start praying and getting my things together to go to the other house to wait for my boyfriend, but my robe is in the bathroom, which is under the bed, but I rush to get it anyways. As I'm walking out, I'm looking up, and then I hear someone step onto one of the steps, but see nothing. These steps make a very distinct noise when stepped on because they're 2x4s. I just ran. I tell my boyfriend what happened. We go back home and we're sitting in our living room talking about it when I hear something upstairs. Then our front door slowly creaks open on its own. We went and talked to his parents and they said to ignore it, give it no power, etc. But his dad was a priest. So he goes over and blesses the house and says everything is okay now and that we can go back to sleep over there at their house if we were scared. We end up sleeping in our house, and the only weird thing I can remember from that night is that I was awake late, which is a normal thing because I have insomnia. Like maybe around 2 or 3 a.m. while everyone else was asleep, I heard a tapping on the wall right next to me on my left. My son sleeps in a thing that swings and it makes a rhythmic clicking, but this was much different and much louder, but very much in sync with the swing and directly by my head outside the wall. Swing would click, then a loud tap, back and forth for around 3 minutes and then stopped. This would have been last night, I believe, but I was up again, alone while everyone else was sleeping. I was in bed next to my boyfriend and our son was in his swing by the stairs. All of a sudden, I hear what sounds like a broom falling onto another broom, like 2 pieces of thin hollow metal clinking together towards the kitchen area so loud that I jumped and get scared and wake up my boyfriend. We went to investigate, but there was nothing that had fallen at all. This morning, the door opened on its own again, and we heard a few creaks upstairs, but nothing major. Now tonight, boyfriend was walking from his mom's to our house and swears he heard the breathing of someone right behind him, very close. No footsteps or leaves or anything, just the breathing. I heard him scream when it happened. A second later, he rushed in, locked the door, and told me what happened. We stayed inside most of the night. Now I'm rewriting all this because when I started writing it, I was hearing footsteps on my porch, pacing back and forth, then a loud bang on the same wall right beside me. At one point, it sounded like it was on the roof above me. Then I heard someone take a few deep breaths right beside me as if they were inside the wall or sitting right beside me on the bed. I tried to wake up my boyfriend, but he was so exhausted today, so he doesn't want to wake up, and I am terrified. I don't know what's fucking with us, but I want it to stop. Sorry for the long post. If anyone has any ideas about what's going on with us, I'd love to hear it. Any ideas on how to get this shit to go away? So, I recently started a security job for the graveyard shift. The building has 12 floors, roof access, and 2 parking garages for reference. No one but me and my partner are supposed to be in the building overnight. Also, you need a key card to use the elevator to get into the doors to the stairwell. Anyway, the first night, one of the motion-activated toilets went off when no one was near it. We had to do a bathroom patrol. It happened right when we opened the door on a vacant floor. A week ago, I was doing a patrol from the 12th floor mechanical room. As I left the room into the stairwell, the rooftop door was being rattled and slightly banged on. I ran up there and there was nothing. I assumed it was a bird or something. I started my way down, and then the 11th floor door started jiggling. I jogged my way down, 'cause it's my job, and I had to go there anyways. I swiped my key, and there's no one yet again. It was quiet besides toilets and walkie-talkies going off when we weren't touching it. Last night, I was doing bathroom patrol at 4 a.m., listening to my music in one ear. I go to the 11th floor to start, and I hear footsteps behind me. I pulled out the headphones while turning around, getting ready to tell them to get out. Yet again, no one. But right as those footsteps stopped, there were heavy footsteps on the floor above me. But then they stopped right above me when I figured out where they were coming from. After I got out of that floor into the stairwell and shut the door, I heard it sounded like it was trying to open, but wasn't moving. There isn't any wind inside the building, and nothing showed up on security cameras. I might try to record tonight, not sure if I'm allowed to do that. I'll have to ask. Sorry for the long post.